Hey everybody, welcome to a newer type of video. So today's topic, we're going to be talking about testing, playtesting. How do you get the most out of your playtesting? Listen, time's money. Time is important. Time is very important. And when you playtest, you don't want to be wasting anyone's time. You don't want to be wasting your time or your friends or your teammates or whoever. So how do we get the most out of playtesting? What do we got to do to get the biggest bang for our buck? And for starters, I think one of the most important things is we have to make sure that we understand what we're doing when we playtest. And fundamentally, what is playtesting? Playtesting is when you are trying to understand and figure out what works in general, and more specifically, what works for what you are trying to do, and what is the best options available to you, best sequencing, things like that, learning your lines. So how do we approach that? How do we get the best out of that? Well, we have to rewind game states. I don't want to say not everyone does this, but it is something that you should absolutely be doing. If you're not doing this in your playtesting, you're wasting your time. If you make a very blatant mistake during playtesting, rewind the game state. There's nothing wrong with it. You're playing with your friends. You're learning. You're trying to get better at the game. If you don't correct bad behavior and misplays, then you won't improve. And that's just not just GA. Like Grand Archive is not solely tied with that concept. This goes for life too. If you find yourself doing things over and over that aren't really benefiting you or at your detriment, and you realize them and acknowledge those mistakes, if you are not correcting those behaviors, then you're just not improving. And again, that's something we all have to focus on sometimes. So in playtesting, make sure you're rewinding game states. You need to learn the lines. You need to learn from your mistakes. And you need to figure out, by rewinding game states, to realize, hey, wait a second. If I play this card, I lose the game. I might not lose immediately, but I might lose like 2 turns from now because I did that. And that's why, and sometimes it happens immediately, but again, that's why you rewind time. Because you want to understand and not get false positives and false negatives in your testing. You might think that you're winning, when in reality, you're only winning because the person you're playtesting against just made a complete blunder. And they're just punting the game to you. So then you come to an event thinking, oh, I'm gonna beat this guy over and over. And then they play it properly, and you're like, oh, I thought I was favored, and I'm not favored. So you don't want those. So another concept to think about is when you're playing and playtesting, to try to find the right cards that you really need and want to use. What cards available could they have been? A good example is the night before Ascent Niagara, I brought Water Ciel and Fire Crux Knight Lorraine. Water Ciel, Niagara was the least prepared event that I had. I took Fire Crux Knight. Unfortunately, one went away from top 8, but I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So I brought Water Ciel, and we were testing the night before, and I wanted to play test against Merlin and Winsariu because I knew that they were my hardest matchups. So when I played against Merlin, one of the cards that I had in and out of the deck was Acquiescing Rejection. That card was a 4-cost that just said, hey, negate target card activation unless your opponent says, let me draw 2. So it was effectively +1, but the problem was it was really good against bad players because they would just almost always let you resolve the draw 2, because really that's what I wanted. Or but it was really good against bad players, but it was really bad against good players, because good players would know, hey, we'll just go 1 for 1. That's fine. Like, I don't need it. But when I was playtesting without it, and I was playing against Merlin, one of the things I realized really quickly was they would go Creative Shock, and I would sit there looking at my 8-card hand and look at Cerulean Decree and go, really wish this was Acquiescing Rejection, because almost every single time, Merlin is going to want to resolve Creative Shock. They're going to want to get their value from that card. They're going to want to draw and discard the float. So they'll almost always let Acquiescing Rejection draw me 2 cards, which effectively means I played Creative Shock. We played Creative Shock. So that was a situation where I didn't have the card in the deck, but I could very clearly see, like, hey, wait a second. If any of these cards in my hand were that card, that'd be really good. And that is something that you need to think about when you are playtesting. Not just the cards that are in your hand, but the cards that could be in your hand and what decks they will matter against. There are a lot of times when I playtest that I look at cards in my hand and I go, I brought those in for this matchup and they're really not doing anything. So if they're not doing anything, I need to get them out and put other cards in. Or I have cards that I'm thinking, man, this is really good against a different deck. Doesn't really do anything against this deck. Like, what cards do I really want to see in these matchups? So that's another good way you can get value out of playtesting pretty quickly. Is just by playing and thinking about all the other cards that you can fit in at once. It's almost like you're running like 10 games in your head at the same time, not just the one you're playing. And then the next thing is observing weaknesses. Observing weaknesses and strengths. Right now, Razor Gale is a dark horse, and Razor Gale is a really, it's a solid deck. It falls flat on its face the moment anyone starts maining Scatter Essence or siding it in, but we're still somehow not there yet because Razor Gale is still topping, so I digress. But that is a deck that has fundamental weaknesses. Its weakness is Scatter Essence on Razor Gale, and then you play Nullifying Lantern, and they can't Cyclical Breeze it back. Or you play Nullifying Mirror, and they can't Veiling Breeze every freaking turn. So the deck has fundamental weaknesses that you don't necessarily need to playtest. You can just conceptualize it in your head. If they get their Razor Gale blown up, I should be winning these games because that's one of their main win cons. Now, as the Razor Gale player, you can then also recognize, hey, that is my weakness. How do I improve upon that? Well, let me throw in Cloud Strikers. Cloud Strikers will let me deal 6 damage to their face because I'm going to have my winds facing west with Gong Ming. I have Tempest Downfalls. Tempest Downfalls deal 3 damage for free if I've suppressed a unit. I have Ace and Protectors and just weenies for beats. So I have Razor Gale game plan, and then I have Hit Their Face Really Hard game plan. So it's kind of a mixed bag here where you have both. So it's not just stringent on just the Razor Gale. And obviously, that's something that developed over time, and you don't need to necessarily playtest that. We just kind of went through right away, hey, Razor Gale loses to Scatter Essence. Can we make the deck a little bit different that it doesn't just automatically fall flat on its face against Scatter Essence? We just did that without playtesting any games in this short little cram session, which ties me into my next point, which is most testing could be done in theory. This is my personal opinion. This is my personal philosophy. I think that a lot of playtesting can be done and be done effectively just by theory crafting. A lot of times you can, in theory, make something make sense and then try it in practice in that specific scenario and find out real quick whether or not you were absolutely correct or you need to rethink your entire thought process on that theory surrounding that deck type or the thing you were theorizing. Like in the case of Razor Gale, we just did a theory craft right there. The theory is it should be losing to Scatter Essence, but let's add some other cards in that will help it against Scatter Essence decks or decks that are going to hurt our Fantasia. Now, when we take that into practice, we can realistically only play a couple of games against someone running Scatter Essence and find out right away, using the prior points that we brought up just now about what other cards could be in my hand, and we can figure out real quick whether or not theory matches reality or there is a discrepancy and we need to dig in deeper. Most of the time, theory crafting tends to match reality, at least on a pretty core level, like a baseline level. But you need to be able to observe those weaknesses and strengths in theory crafting as well. A good case example is Utrecht. We felt like Utrecht's Ascent Utrecht, I think it was the first European Ascent, Watermill Arsana was doing really good. And level 3 Vanitas was just printed through ALC Alter. Water Arsana was just started to get figured out how to beat it. A lot of it revolved around Fracturizing Lantern. Water Allies were the only decks doing that. So with Vanitas 3 coming out, a lot of us internally in main deck, like I think me and Corbin, maybe it was just me. So there's only a few of us that thought of this, but we were like, hey, Watermelon's really good. Watermelon can Fracturize Lantern and has good endgame against Watermill Arsana. and in theory does really well. Our Sonnet does not have a good way to deal with a Fracturized Lantern. But what we realized was, well, wait a second. If that's the case, why not just play Vanitas and play Force Scatter Essence main to blow up the Fracturized Lantern? That was all done in theory. And in practice, it worked exactly like theory. We were exactly right. Big shout out to Noel from Chess Club. They got top 8 with Water Merlin at that Ascent because I think it was really well positioned, and not a lot of people were that ahead of the game on maining Scatter Essence in some capacity. There was a Vanitas that made it. If Corbin and I's plane didn't get hit by a truck, not kidding. Editor David can put this on the video of the plane. Our plane got hit by a truck. If it didn't, very, very easily, we probably could have got top 8 with that too, because we were so far ahead of the meta that we knew Vanitas was going to be fine. And we knew Vanitas was the correct pick for that event. But that is something that was done in theory. We took it to theory, and then we took it to testing, and it matched theory, and we saved so much time doing so. So hopefully these couple of points can help you improve your testing and save you time and just improve your game. We'll see you around for the next one.